Robbers on Woke.
Welcome to it. It is TV's Rob is Unwoke. I am your very unhumble, unwoke host, TV's Rob. And this is the grand finale for the rankings of the Star Trek movies that Stephen, Michael, and I have been partaking in, going through all of the Star Trek films and deciding which ones are the best, which ones are the worst, which ones fall in between. And hopefully you've agreed with our rankings so far. We're through 13 all the way up into the top 5. So we're at the 5 best Trek movies to date. And I'm pretty sure that none of you will be surprised about number 1. But I think 5, 4, 3, and 2, you'll find some surprises. So without any further ado, and I thank you for your patience as I've been trying to work on these episodes, because doing video for YouTube and doing audio with everything that I have going on in terms of work and other obligations, it's been quite the wild ride, but I appreciate your patience, and let me know in the comments what you think, and feel free to share your own rankings. And if you want to come on and discuss your rankings, just hit me up on Twitter. You know how to find me. Just let me know. Without any further ado, let's take it away to the top 5 with Michael and Steven. So we're to the top 5, everybody. Top 5. Mm-hmm. This is where it's going to get really interesting.
Yeah, I think
All right,
so.
Michael, what do you have?
I'm looking forward to hearing where you guys place this one. Star Trek First Contact.
So, what is it you want me to do?
Simple. Conduct your warp flight tomorrow morning, just as you planned.
Why tomorrow morning?
Because at 11 o'clock, an alien ship will begin passing through this solar system.
Alien, you mean extraterrestrials? More bad guys?
Good guys. They're on a survey mission. They have no interest in Earth. Too primitive.
Oh.
Doctor, tomorrow morning when they detect the warp signature from your ship and realize that humans have discovered how to travel faster than light, they decide to alter their course. And they make first contact with Earth, right here.
Here?
Actually, over there.
It is one of the pivotal moments in human history, Doctor. You get to make first contact with an alien race. And after you do, everything begins to change.
Your theories on warp drive allow fleets of starships to be built, and mankind to start exploring the galaxy.
It unites humanity in a way that no one ever thought possible when they realize they're not alone in the universe. Poverty, disease, war, they'll all be gone within the next 50 years.
But unless you make that warp flight tomorrow morning, before 11:15, none of it will happen.
And you people, you're all astronauts on some kind of Star Trek.
I think it was it's the best Next Generation movie by far.
I mean, and the bar was so high for that, too. I mean,
really. They outdid themselves. Even coming off Generations, they took this movie and turned it into what I think they hope the Kelvin movies were going to be. This was a real action movie with, plenty of good Star Trek plot line, and time travel notwithstanding, just witnessing the flight of the Phoenix.
okay, now the time travel trope
makes a big difference in
the time travel trope is something that I feel has been used a whole lot more than it really should have been. But when it's done right, it's it's a great way to go. This was I think this is the example of when it's done right, it becomes great, because it was handled with the right amount of nuance and the right amount of respect and knowledge of, okay, if we do this, this is what can happen. I think they nailed the formula on that one. Like they did in another movie, the one with the whales. It's like it's almost like the people behind First Contact watched the previous Star Trek movies to see what they can do.
I think so.
Continue. Sorry.
Well, and then Patrick Stewart was off the chart good in this movie with just him going through the emotions of A, being assimilated, and B, continuously having to fall back. That whole speech in his ready room, I've used that to kind of mirror what we're going through right now. But it's something that pulls that whole movie together, is the fact that he is uniquely qualified and still uniquely damaged by the encounter with the Borg. And if this event had happened to any other captain in the fleet, I don't think it would have come out as anywhere near as good as effective as they were in beating them.
Can't argue most of that. Go ahead, go for it, Steve. Number 5.
Right. So my number
for
5
the Captain Princess.
My number 5
known
is
as
Star
Steve.
Trek 3. So
Okay.
If you look at it, he basically had a trilogy bookended by 2 individual movies. So, and Star Trek 3 kind of broke the mold for me on how people normally see trilogies, where you have a great first movie, a meh second movie, and then a killer third movie. In my opinion, all 3 movies, when it came to 2, 3, and 4, were awesome movies. So, Star Trek 3, it definitely brought a lot of anguish into things. You see the Enterprise pulling in, and she's beat to hell, right? And especially
But not destroyed.
Not destroyed.
But not destroyed.
Not destroyed.
Or in multiple pieces.
Right. So, but she's pulling in, she's beat to hell. You even have that nice shot of Yeoman Rand sitting on the observation deck and watching the ship pull in, and she's just like, will you never learn?
Wait, was that Rand? I thought that was somebody else.
No, that was Rand.
Okay. I guess she was I guess that was one of her drugged out phases.
Yeah, no, that was Rand. So probably didn't recognize her all that well, because I think it was the first time in the movies that you saw her. The last time you saw her, she was in one of the classic episodes.
No, she was the transporter chief in the motionless picture.
That's right. No wonder we can't remember that. But
it went by so slowly.
Well, I mean, that was the most memorable thing, was her beaming McCoy on board.
Exactly, yeah.
And then I don't think you saw her the entire rest of the movie.
No,
So-
after the transporter room sequences were done, that was it.
So the next time you see her, she's in a completely different uniform, not even on the Enterprise. And she's
With
sitting
different
there
color hair.
watching the Enterprise come in and just shaking her head. Went and did it again, you dumb bastard.
That son of a bitch.
So, but overall, it was a great movie. A lot of people talk about it cheapened the death of Spock and this, that, the other. For me, it was an outstanding moment, because is it really the Enterprise? Is it really that crew without Spock? Right? I mean, even the guy that he fought with the most, McCoy, was willing to do whatever it took to get him back, if only to get Spock out of his head, which was his absolute worst nightmare. Right?
Especially when he found out what it was. It's like that green-blooded son of a bitch. It's his revenge for all those arguments he lost.
So,
which is exactly how McCoy would have seen that.
Make it quick, Admiral. They are moving him to the Federation funny farm.
Yes, poor friend. I hear he's fruity as a nutcake.
2 minutes.
Jim. How many fingers do I have up?
That's not very damn funny.
Your sense of humor's returned.
Hell it has. What's that?
Lexerin.
Lexerin?
What for?
You're suffering from a Vulcan mind meld, Doctor.
That green-blooded son of a bitch. It's his revenge for all those arguments he lost.
Sir, Commander Starfleet on emergency channel. He orders you to surrender this vessel.
No reply, Checo.
Aye, sir.
Steady as she goes, Sulu.
Alert, yellow alert. All station, yellow alert. Alert, yellow alert. All station, yellow alert.
1 minute to space doors. Are you just gonna walk through them?
Calm yourself, Doctor.
Sir, Excelsior powering up with orders to pursue.
"30 seconds to space doors."
Warning, secure space doors. Warning, secure space doors. Warning, secure space doors.
Now, Mr. Scott.
Sir?
The doors, Mr. Scott.
Hi, sir. I'm working on it.
Danger. Space doors are closed. Danger. Danger. Space doors are closed.
We have cleared space doors.
Full impulse power.
Aye, sir.
Stand by tractor beam.
Tractor beam. Aye.
Now, he tries to get away with warp drive. He's really in for a shock.
Excelsior closing to 4,000 meters, sir.
Scotty, we'll need everything you have.
Aye, sir. Warp drive standing by.
Kirk, if you do this, you'll never sit in the captain's chair again.
Warp speed.
Aye, sir. Warp speed.
Prepare for warp speed. Stand by transwarp drive.
Transwarp at your command, sir.
Full power level.
Execute.
Full power level. Engine room reports full power.
Transport drive, maximum velocity in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Exactly.
For me, number 5, just like with the pretty princess patriot Captain Steve here, try to weave in as many of those as possible. The Search for Spock.
That needs to be your handle. Just as soon as we're off, you need to put all of those.
If my phone weren't on the charger, I'd do it right now.
Use all the characters. For me, Search for Spock. Search for Spock. The same for a lot of the same reasons that you gave. It was the meh movie of the trilogy that they had somehow organically concocted. It didn't. They weren't really setting out to do it at first. It just kind of worked out that way. And the reintroduction of Savick as a just cold green-blooded Vulcan, I don't know if that was the right way to go about it with that character. I understand recasting, so you have to go in a different direction, blah, 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 blah. The thing that drove me nuts was the fact that the Genesis experiment was deemed a successful failure, and when the planet's all breaking apart, that nobody seems to comprehend, not even the guy who helped design the damn thing can figure out that the reason that this planet is falling apart and not having the results that they were expecting it would, like the cave on, Regula, was they couldn't figure out that the reason that whole thing was falling apart was because it wasn't detonated on a planet or a rock, a planetoid surface. It was detonated in the middle of a frickin' nebula with the Reliant as its catalyst. Of course it wasn't going to work. It wasn't detonated where it should have been. Yet somehow nobody seems to figure that out. I mean, unless I missed something.
Well, that, and it still had a life form on board, and it happened to be Khan. So, of course, the planet's going to try and kill anybody who comes nearby.
Exactly. I mean, if planets have personalities, that one had the worst one possible. So, but I like the fact that it was a clever way of bringing Spock back. That wasn't like, oh, hey, it's a clone, or he didn't really die, or we went back in time. No, I mean, it was clever. It was a cleverly written movie. You gave the crew was suffering with and battling their emotions and feelings of loss, and you had Kirk step up and be Kirk. It was, I've got to go do this. I feel so strongly about my best friend being dead. I have to go right this wrong. And it introduced new elements of Vulcan mythology, the whole Katra and everything. You saw at the very end Mark Leonard portraying Sarek, where he said the line, my logic is flawed is where my son is concerned. So, you get to see some new elements. It brought something new while giving you what you expect from a Star Trek movie, from Star Trek in general. And, the prison break scene, Sulu going, "Don't call me tiny." It had humorous moments that were woven into the story. It also showed that, hey, wait a second, you can have multiple captains on a starship and it's no big deal because Scotty was promoted to captain of engineering. Which I thought you could only have one captain. I didn't know in their way of doing things that you would have captains in different divisions, but not necessarily in command of the ship. I mean, I know in the military, obviously you can have captains everywhere, but it's not it's just not the same in the way that they do it here. So I found it interesting. I like the theft of the Enterprise was cool. The sabotage of the Excelsior.
Yes.
Even though they decided that the Excelsior experiment was a failure because Scotty sabotaged the thing. I mean, did the Excelsior and the transwarp system really get a fair shake? Probably not. Why? Because Scotty decided to make some random ass quip. The more they complicate the plumbing, the easier it is to stop up the drain. I mean, that's great. It was a good movie all the way around. So, and not the best Trek, not the worst. So it gets in the top 5.
And who didn't love Christopher Lloyd in his role as a Klingon?
And when we get to the voyage home, I'm definitely gonna tie that whole thing together. When you think about it, I'll just do it now.
I thought he did an awesome job playing the Klingon commander.
And think about it, this Klingon bird of prey that was stolen from Christopher Lloyd went back and it became a time machine that was stolen from Doc Brown. I mean, talk about putting two franchises together in a perfectly beautiful way that most people wouldn't even understand.
They stole the time machine from Doc Brown, went back in time, and then had a problem with the power source that prevented them from getting back to the future until they got it fixed. Sound familiar?
There you go. And again, part of a trilogy.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Right,
Except in this
4.
case, the trilogy just didn't go continually downhill.
Exactly, yeah. Absolutely right. All right, Michael, what's your number 4?
So number 4 is actually number 4. It was the first one I ever saw in the theater, and there's a lot of just nostalgia surrounding the fact that they put them in a familiar environment. You know, my brother actually was a Marine at the time. He'd been on that Enterprise. He actually was stationed on the Wasp, but he was able to go and visit that Enterprise. And it was the whole thing, the natural comedy that they were able to grow out of the storyline. And just the harmony of the cast, like the crew working together to get this done. It was all just really well laid out and well executed. And for that, I think it's not my favorite movie. It's the most heartwarming of the movies, I think.
And definitely with that one, they worked in humor so great. Like when they were getting Chekhov from the hospital, you know, name, rank, Chekhov, Pavel, rank, Admiral. Like, so awesome when he did that. So,
and that was a joke that they even tried to lift and steal for purposes in TNG, and it didn't land the same way.
No.
Because you had Data being the ever-present straight man. You know the episode I'm referring to, right? The season 2 finale where Riker...
Oh, Shades of Grey, where he's passed out.
Yeah, Pulaski, he comes out of it and they're like, you know, what's your name and your rank? And he's like, or do you know who you are? He's like, of course I know who I am. I'm Captain Jean-Luc Picard of the USS Enterprise. And Picard's like, well, you know, the Admiral and myself, you know, we're here to check on you. And Data's like, I don't think you have the ability to promote me to the rank of Admiral. I know where that joke came from, and you guys did not get it right like they did with Chekhov, Bones, and Shatner.
Not at all. So,
for me, number 4,
I thought it was my
Undiscovered Country.
Isn't it my turn?
Oh, I thought you did. I thought you went.
No, Michael went.
Oh, my bad.
Okay.
Shit, I fucked it up. we were going so well, and I screwed it up. Damn it. Okay. Sorry, Steve.
Thanks a lot, Shatner.
I don't know what to do with my hands.
All right, so my number 4 is Insurrection.
Have you been in a fight, Mr. Wolf?
No, sir. It is the Gorge.
The Gorge? Oh, well, it's hardly noticeable.
Smooth as an android's bottom, eh, Data?
I beg your pardon, sir?
Admiral Dowernick wants to know why we haven't left yet.
We're not going anywhere. Deck 5.
Klingons never do anything small, do you?
Dr. Crusher asked to speak to you when you returned.
Dr. Crusher.
Captain, the Sona hostages declined to be examined. I had them confined to quarters.
And our people?
They're fine. In fact, they're better than fine. Increased metabolism, improved muscle tone, high energy. We should all be so lucky.
Very well, Doctor. Picard out.
Warp, don't release the sonar officers till I've talked to Ada Ruafo.
Aye, sir.
Commander, may I?
I don't care what anybody else says about it. I thought it was a great movie. Some of the humorous elements, yeah, it's kind of like, why, really? But for the most part, it kind of worked for me. I mean, you had Data being Data when he overhears Troy and Crusher's conversation about their breasts. That worked out.
Oh, no, not breasts. It wasn't breasts. It was boobs. I mean,
sorry.
Straight up. I mean, the fact that they still use the word boobs in the 24th century, I'm like, yes, boobs are forever.
So you had Data being Data in that case, which worked out perfectly for me, although screwed it up with other stuff like the flotation device joke, which completely fell flat. And then
if you were a female android, I would have said, yeah, I mean, that would have made sense.
Maybe. But especially his interactions with the young boy, when we've spent so many years seeing Data basically being childlike himself and having to learn from everybody else. And now here's Data, and he actually gets to pass on what he's learned to a child. Such an awesome moment for me. And the whole storyline altogether where, just because y'all are trying to stop being Starfleet to get what you want doesn't mean we're going to stop. We're going to make sure that things go right. It was just such a Trek movie with that whole thing. I don't think they were actually going to try and limp back to Earth on impulse power. I'm pretty sure somebody was going to, go out there with a warp core for them. So I kind of shoot down that point that somebody made earlier. I can't remember who it was. Yeah. So I really don't think they were going to try and do that. They tried to do that in Deep Space Nine, and even then somebody went out and got them. See, I did watch some of it, as much as I despise that series. But overall, it was a great movie, and in all reality, when you think about it, a great setup for Picard, and seeing how Starfleet has started shifting some of its views and how extreme they're going to go, and how a crew that we love and has been the forefront of Starfleet for years, what are they going to do when that moment comes?
But again, this was the instance where Picard fought for what he believed. He didn't take his ball and go home like he did in his own series.
Yes, but we were still at a
still
point.
Don't like that series.
We were still at a point where it was only part of the system that was trying to overcome things in insurrection. So he still had something he felt could be saved. Whereas Picard came along, and it was like the entirety of Earth, not just a small segment of Starfleet. Not even all of Star. It was the entire Earth government just said, nope, we just got attacked. We're more important than you are. Your society can die. We're gonna stay where we are simply because a couple androids came and killed a few people. We don't care that your entire civilization's about to die because of a star. So for me, it's still two completely separate situations.
Fair enough. So you're still wrong.
Now you can go with your number 4.
Number 4, Undiscovered Country. What? It's top 4?
How dare you?
Oh, I'm sorry. To me, is it a good movie? Yes, it's a good movie. Was it a proper farewell, send-off movie for the original crew? Absolutely. There's not a whole lot I could say that is wrong with the movie. I just feel like on my scale of likes, this is the one that it's the best of the rest after the top 3. And visually, I think the movie still holds up even today. Visually, it holds up. I think of all of them, it's the one that holds up the best. The storyline is something that it was very fitting for the time. I don't like the fact that you had David Warner in 2 movies back to back playing different characters, but that voice is so recognizable that you know exactly who it is. So, and the fact that he gets killed sucks.
In all fairness, though, he needed redemption after 5.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I think that he also got it when he was playing Gul Madred in season 6 of TNG. You know, there are 4 lights, okay? Not 5, not 3, but 4. But
loved him in that role.
I like the tension between the Klingons and Kirk, but I like the fact that they were able to move beyond it. At the end, you got to see the ball get rolling to the universe that we see in TNG. I liked the conspiracy element of it. I like the fact that you had Renee, Odo as, a Starfleet colonel who was, we'll go in there, we'll bust them out, we'll do this, we'll do that. Oh, what if this could precipitate a war? Well, frankly, Mr. President, we could clean their chronometers. It's like, that's so Odo-like to say.
Yes.
So, and him being part of the conspiracy at the end of the movie, that's like plot twist. I like the fact that you had Kurtwood Smith as the Federation president. So, that undeniable, recognizable voice, just a few years removed from RoboCop and being Clarence Boddicker. So one of my other favorite movies of all time. This movie really, to me, is the best of the rest. I can't really say there's anything wrong with it other than how did the Excelsior get refitted so much in such a short amount of time? Because that bridge was half the size and all of a sudden had blue everywhere. I mean, I get it. Ships change and everything. Sulu having his own command, I thought was pretty cool. But
how did the Enterprise bridge get refit so quickly between Star Trek V and Star Trek VI?
Well, they just did a paint job, and
all the consoles were completely different. What are you talking about?
The layout was basically the same.
The layout, sure, but the consoles were completely different. They went back to push buttons, whereas like 5 was all touchscreen.
Yeah. I always find that really weird how much the bridge changes in every movie.
Not to mention,
can I over nerd on this for a second? Because from what I understand, reading technical manuals and stuff like that, the bridge actually comes in a bridge module, and it can be exchanged as one piece. And when they do a refit, they'll pull the bridge module because the main computer's underneath it, and they can just put a different one in, depending on what configuration of the bridge they want.
Okay,
fair enough.
I'll go along with that.
And again, that's obviously a retcon for how things change that quickly.
No, I mean now
it's a reason.
Now that you mention it, I do have the tech manuals, and I remember on that class of ship, the main computer was right there, straight down the center of the saucer. So that's why you got that sensor module right there on the bottom too. It's right there connected.
And of course, in IRL, the reason that you had the dramatic change from 4 to 5 was the set was left out in the rain and got destroyed, so they had to rebuild it. And of course, after 5, I guess they didn't think they were going to do any more, so they stripped the set, and then they had to rebuild it. But new director or new returning director, wanted to give it a different look, a more militaristic feel. So that's why you have the color scheme and the floor patterns. The only knock I have on 6 is the redressed Enterprise D sets. If you're gonna go that bare bones and that cheap on things, just don't show those parts of the ship. I mean, the Federation president's office was 10 forward, and it was obviously 10 forward. I mean, putting drapes in front of the windows does not make it a totally different set. You know, engineering. Hello, that was the D's engineering. Everybody knows it because you see the warp chamber. You know, I mean, when you see the chamber and you see that design, I'm thinking, you mean to tell me that was the design Starfleet went with 70 years before they built the Enterprise D and we're using the same one? Stop it. The transporter room, you just set up a little radioactive blast shield in front of the transporter control console.
That's
I mean,
not even the first time they did that with the transporters. So I don't know if you were watching back when this all happened, but when they were gearing up to airing All Good Things, Jonathan Frakes actually hosted a top 5 countdown. And during that, he actually revealed a couple of different things about the show. And the Next Generation Transporters was the original series
part
transporters.
Was actually the bottom part
flipped over.
Yeah, I saw that too.
So,
but they were reusing some pieces, but it wasn't the whole set.
I mean, again,
little
all you got to do is change a couple backgrounds, flip it over, and you got a whole new transporter.
That's true. And give it a different paint job. You know, but I mean, the doors were straight up Enterprise D. They just had these little stickers on them that showed that it was different. I mean, like I said, if I were going to knock Star Trek 6, that would be the only thing. But I understand that from a studio standpoint, we're doing this movie, we have this show going on. Let's take parts and pieces and let's just redress them and use them for this, as opposed to building whole new sets. I mean, the conference room that they were in at the very beginning of the movie, you know, where Kirk's being told, you get to go play with the Klingons. I mean, that wasn't even a set. That was like a recital hall on the Paramount lot or something like that. I mean, you know, it wasn't even designed or built for that. It was a banquet hall. So I get it. I get the cost saving measures. If I were going to knock it, that's the only thing I'd have to say about it. So now it gets really tough, right? Number 3.
How do you feel about, when we're talking about engineering sets, how do you feel about Star Trek 2009 filming like main engineering in a brewery?
Yeah, okay.
It certainly explains why Scotty's in charge of it.
That's true.
Yeah, absolutely. And not just any brewery, the Anheuser-Busch brewery. You know, so no wonder Uhura was ordering Budweiser Classics at the bar. I mean, to be honest, I mean, the engineering set for that movie, I mean, I applaud JJ for wanting a practical set as opposed to we're going to film, you know, really up close and we're going to have green screen everywhere. There's something to be said for that practicality, being able to run around, you know, through the set. I mean, I kind of appreciate the fact that they were showing just how massive this stuff can really be, as opposed to, you know, on TV where you just get this room and we're supposed to believe that this one little tube here does all this magnificent stuff. But at the same time, having itty bitty little cores that they were shooting out of the back of the ship, like, shouldn't it be one massive core, seeing as we call it the warp core, not the warp cores?
Right.
So
you're also talking about a ship that for some reason has water tubes and turbines out of nowhere.
Yeah.
But when it really comes down to it, they were falling into the same thing that a bunch of movies have been doing lately, which was plastering branding all over the place. I mean, you look at the Jurassic World movies, and it's branding all over the place. I mean, granted, they're portraying a theme park, but, you know, they did it there. They did it with, there was quite a bit of it in Independence Day Resurgence. Right? And it's the same thing here, just branding, because they're trying to make money. So
yeah, but practical sets over completely computer generated sets and everything, I'll give a tip of the cap for that. Now, if I'm going to complain about set redressing and set stealing, I mean, sickbay in First Contact for the Enterprise E being the exact same sickbay from Voyager. I'm thinking this ship is bigger. It should have a bigger sickbay. And if it's the most advanced ship in the fleet, it should have a more advanced sickbay. Why are we using the one from Voyager? So that's why whenever people start talking about, they're doing this, they're doing that, I try to ignore it as far as, do I think this is a good movie or do I think this is a bad movie? Because if I get into those deep technical things, I'm going to hate everything I see.
I mean, when it comes to that, though, that was the design that they started with the holographic doctor, the EMH program. So it makes sense that that the initial designs are going to resemble each other. But also, we saw it in Star Trek Next Generation where you have your main medical bay, but there are also other areas of medical that you don't, like the room where they did Worf's spinal surgery, right, was completely separate from the main medical bay. So we already know that on that ship they have specialized medical facilities that are separate from the main medical bay. So it could be that
in Nemesis you had the lab.
Yeah, I mean, it could be that in that instance we were simply seeing one of those specialized rooms instead of the main medical bay.
Fair enough. All right, number 3.
Number 3 is number 3. The Search for Spock. Coming off Star Trek 2 and having a story that Leonard Nimoy got to step back from and direct and shape in a way that really gave weight to Spock's death in the first place, and then brought him back in probably one of the most natural ways, most easily understandable ways that they could have. And again, Christopher Lloyd, I'll watch him in anything, but as Klingon, as Kang, is just, he's over the top. It's so great to watch him just let loose and, overact Shatner, which is a feat in and of itself.
Yeah, who thought somebody could do that?
No.
But how about, he's the Klingon commander who killed his woman at the beginning of the movie.
Well, she violated his trust. She was completely dishonorable.
But didn't she need to verify that the information was genuine?
It's not her business.
I mean, what if she had given him data that was like, the kid with the broom acting like it's a lightsaber? What if that were on that disc instead of the Genesis data? He would have killed her anyways. I mean, I thought she was helping him by reviewing that data. Now, of course, you just can't have loose strings.
Maybe. Although I just remembered there was a point in our first discussion that you brought up about Savick being a pedophile because of dealing with Spock. I've done a little bit of research since then. Ponfar does not start at puberty like we were thinking. It starts at adulthood. So she was not, in fact, a pedophile.
Oh, okay.
The jury's still out on Neelix and Kesta.
Neelix will always be a pedophile. Anything else you got for Search for Spock there, Michael?
The recasting of Kirstie Alley with, I can't remember her name off the top of my head.
Robin Curtis.
Robin Curtis, that's right. She was later in an episode of MacGyver, and she was fine. She was great. not as a as a Vulcan.
She made a better Romulan.
It did not work.
She made a better Romulan than she did a Vulcan.
Yeah, I think so.
And that was the whole problem with it in the first place, was Saavik is a Vulcan-Romulan hybrid, which was played beautifully by Kirstie Alley, and then Robin Curtis came in and went straight Vulcan and just destroyed the character.
Absolutely, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right, what's your number 3?
My number 3 is First Contact. So, in my opinion, it is the Wrath of Khan of the Next Generation movies. It brought in a beautiful storyline that had been touched previously with Picard, and brought out something in the Borg culture that we had not seen before, which was, they always talk about the collective, and we just think of the collective as all these Borg who are just, linked together, and we never really think of it as, the collective being something that's actually physically there running everything. And it actually ties in beautifully with the whole idea of the Borg being synonymous with socialism, right? All animals are equal, but some animals are more equal than others. And so you got this one being who's actually running the whole show. They're the only one with essentially their own identity, right? Because you notice the Borg Queen never says, we this, we that. It is I. I am the collective. I do this. I do that. So
I am the one who is many.
All animals are equal, but some animals are more equal than others. So, but, I mean, just, the action itself in dealing with a well-known Trek villain, and, actually going back and exploring, how humanity made the leap from war-torn planet to founder of one of the greatest space republics known in the history of science fiction, right? And bringing those two together, and quite possibly the greatest thing in the entire movie, Barclay being Barclay.
Yes.
So, I mean,
absolutely.
All around, like I said, for me, it is the Wrath of Khan of the Next Generation movies, well deserving of number 3.
All right. For me, number 3 is The Voyage Home. We have to save those whales. Have to save those whales, damn it. One way or the other.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Admiral, there be whales here.
Well done, Mr. Scott. How soon can we be ready for warp speed?
Full power now, sir.
If you will, Mr. Sulu.
Aye, sir. Warp speed.
I found it to be that was the perfect elixir for the 2 movies prior. You're dealing with, revenge, loss, grief, rebirth. You're dealing with all of these really heady subjects. You have Kirk suffering the loss of his son, after losing his best friend, but then getting his best friend back, but not being able to get his son back. You have, the crew is exiled, and they, the bit of historical irony, naming the Klingon bird of prey the HMS Bounty, so nice tip of the hat to history. You have and we talked about this before, the time travel trope being used too much, but when it's done right, it could be something great. This is the example of it being used right and being something great. You have you have the whole fish out of water element, but then somehow some of them are really able to go along with the flow a lot better than others. You have the, the hospital jailbreak scene, which was fun. You have, I think he did a little too much LDS. LDS, I mean, he was part of the free speech movement back at Berkeley in the 60s. And then you nail that part, but you screw up LSD. Come on. I mean, the humor in there, it landed. It was funny. It was lighthearted. You got to see a different side of the crew that you don't typically see. So, but then it still showed you what Trek is in terms of the bond of the crew being so strong that they would go back and do things that most of us, as good of people as we try to be, we wouldn't do. I mean, Kirk asking Spock, when Spock is saying, we got to go back and get Chekhov. Is that the logical thing to do? No, but it is the right thing to do. So even, or the human thing to do. I mean, sometimes those instincts, override logic. Like, should I do this? No. Am I gonna? Yeah. I mean, it's like, bro, hold my beer. Check this out. And it was just handled really well. The Enterprise giveth, the Enterprise taketh away. And then at the end of the movie, I mean, you get to see the ramifications of short-sightedness come out to play. I mean, yeah, I know the probe looked like a giant cigar in space with a blue ball hanging from it, but you also got to see how progressive Star Trek can be, because I mean, you had the Indian captain, you had the black female captain, you had, you got to see more ships, you got to see more crews than what you would normally see on any given week. All dealing with the same problem. But you get to see the ramifications of short-sightedness and what can happen if we screw stuff up. Now, it did make a huge political statement all the way through it, but it did it in a way that it was nuanced. You didn't feel like you were being beaten over the head.
It did it
with, got to save the whales, protect the planet.
It did it in a traditional Star Trek fashion.
Exactly. And like I said, after dealing with really heady subjects, we got to have a little bit of fun. And I think that was the best way to go about making that third movie. Lighten it up. And, the neck pinch to the guy blaring the punk music on the bus and everything, with the mohawk and, flipping Kirk the bird and everything. That was cool. The colorful metaphors and Spock's complete, total, utter misuse of them. I mean, it's a fun movie. It's very Trek in the overall arching themes. I really laughed at the end where, they get through the trial portion, and I found it hilarious that the Federation president is standing there, and he's saying that, Admiral Kirk, for your actions, here's your punishment. We're going to demote you to captain and give you command of a starship. I'm thinking,
the charges and specifications are conspiracy, assault on Federation officers, theft of Federation property, namely the Starship Enterprise, sabotage of the USS Excelsior, willful destruction of Federation property, specifically the aforementioned USS Enterprise, and finally, disobeying direct orders of the Starfleet commander. Admiral Kirk, how do you plead?
On behalf of all of us, Mr. President, I'm authorized to plead guilty.
So ended. Because of certain mitigating circumstances, all charges but one are summarily dismissed. The remaining charge, disobeying orders of a superior officer, is directed solely at Admiral Kirk. I'm sure the Admiral will recognize the necessity of keeping discipline in any chain of command.
I do, sir.
James T. Kirk, it is the judgment of this council that you be reduced in rank to captain, and that as a consequence of your new rank, you be given the duties for which you have repeatedly demonstrated unswerving ability: the command of a starship.
Is that really punishing Kirk? Because didn't he demote himself in the first movie, and then, although he didn't demote himself in the second movie, still ended up taking command of the ship because Spock was like, if we were to go on active duty, the ranking officer must be in command. So he still ended up commanding the ship. It's like, you just gave this guy exactly what he wanted. This is just a different circumstance where he did something wrong. And then you know, the crew going up to the star base, and you see them, you know, they're all debating like, oh, we'll get a freighter. Oh, I'm hoping for Excelsior. Then Scotty's like, why would you want that bucket of bolts? And Kirk's like, a ship is a ship. And Scotty's like, whatever you say, thy will be done. And then, you know, you get to the Excelsior, then you just start peeking over the saucer section, and there's the Enterprise A. And it's the same beautiful Constitution refit ship that we had already started to enjoy in the first 3 movies. I thought it handled everything really well.
To your point about the trial, in a way, the president basically admitted it wasn't a true punishment. You know, when he was talking about it, you know, he's like, you know, we're going to put you back in the position that you have proven time and time and time again that you are the man for that job, right? That of a starship captain. So basically what he said was, you make a shitty admiral, but you're one hell of a captain, so we're going to take your rank away, which basically takes away his prestige. It takes away a lot of authority that he has, right? Because he was an admiral. He's got authority over a whole wide range of things. He was chief of Starfleet operations in Motionless Picture, right? Yep. So basically they punished him by taking away his rank and then rewarded him for his actions in saving the planet by putting him back in the position that he's always excelled at. So basically...
And 2 other thoughts on that. When you think about it, he gets all that praise heaped up on him at the end of that movie, and then we laid the egg that is 5. But then
that was our punishment.
Yeah, but then we have... But then you get a nice callback to that particular part right there in Star Trek Beyond, where, you know, Kirk is applying for that vice admiral position at Starbase Yorktown and everything. And that one admiral's like, you know, hey, if you want the job is yours. And he's just like, admirals don't fly. Yeah. No. Well, what's the fun in that? I mean, that encapsulated that part right there perfectly. It was a nice callback from that movie. So that's all I've got for number 3. Now this is going to be really interesting. Number 2.
Here we go. Number 2 for me is Star Trek VI: The Undiscovered Country, and we've gone over it a couple times, but I can't. The fact that it's a mystery appealed to me greatly because I've loved mysteries since I was in middle school. It was really well written. They thought it out, the entire plot. They thought what they were going to do long before. But the weight of this movie, you know, just the first sequence where Praxis explodes. You know, this is the one, you know, I saw this one in the theater too. You would not believe how loud that was over the speakers in the theater. and the gasp from the crowd when it happened was just that sequence alone was breathtaking. And then the way they laid out the way the story went, culminating in Kirk's realization that his prejudice against the Klingons was somewhat unfounded. Like, there were plenty of people that he could blame for who killed his son. Only one person killed his son, but he couldn't blame an entire race of people for something that happened like that. And the other thing, that the mind meld scene, that was painful to watch, because from the things you learned about what the mind meld is supposed to be, first and foremost, for Vulcans, it's supposed to be a moment of intimacy between husband and wife. For it to be used that way, and knowing that, it was really painful to watch, but necessary to get the information that they needed.
And Uhura's face sold it during that scene.
Intense movie.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of that's why I've got Star Trek 6 at my number 2 as well. It was just an outstanding movie. It set the tone from the very beginning what this was going to be. It was going to be dark. It was going to be foreboding. It was going to be very confrontational, and that was set in the tone of the music during the opening credits. And then they immediately followed that up with an explosion. I mean, they just completely set the tone of the movie right there.
And then you cut to an Asian guy having tea on the bridge of his ship. Explosion! We're having tea, thank you very much.
So, they set that up. You could feel the setup coming from the very beginning when they've got the conference going on, and they tell Kirk he's going to be the one to escort them in, and especially look on Cartwright's face, right? And you see the wheels turning in there, and you start to get a sense of what's going on here, right? So you feel something coming on. I mean, just from the very beginning, they set the tone of the movie beautifully. David Warner and Christopher Plummer playing Klingons. Oh my God.
Absolutely.
Outstanding job on both of them for their roles. So that absolutely beautiful. I never saw Klingons the same way again after the two of them.
No.
And then especially Colonel Worf. So that was pretty awesome. Star Trek 6, absolutely outstanding movie. It's always had a special place in my heart. I actually went to see it on my birthday in theaters.
Oh, wow.
And it actually got interrupted. We wound up having to go back to the theater because we had bought our tickets. We were getting ready to get our snacks and everything. And somebody assaulted my sister as we were heading in, and my mother put them on the ground. And we wound up spending several hours in the mall security office while everything was explained. And thankfully, once they figured out what was going on, we went back, and the movie's like 2/3 of the way done by then. So they wound up giving us vouchers to come back any day that we wanted. So we went back a few days later and got to see it. It was the first Star Trek I'd seen in theaters. So I'm right there. I know the sound of that explosion in the beginning. I remember it dearly. But like I said, that one I saw on my birthday, and that whole event, it's always had a near and dear spot in my heart. Seeing a Vulcan go the way they did, being part of the conspiracy. And you can actually sit there and yourself, if you think about it, you can see the logic that they would have gone through to get to that point. right? So, I mean, overall, just an absolutely outstanding movie. Very, very mystery-like, still staying with Trek, and especially, probably the single greatest line I've ever heard in a Star Trek film. If I were human, I believe my response would be, go to hell. If I were human.
Delivered perfectly by
I have
Nimoy.
that in my gift bank on my phone right now, and I use it very frequently.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, when you dive into that movie, you find out that the scene where the Klingons and the Starfleet crew are dining together on the Enterprise.
Mm-hmm.
You find out that what the menu items were, and the fact that they were dyed blue. And this is a dinner scene. Everybody's supposed to be eating. So, but nobody wanted to touch that stuff. They actually had to put a bounty on the food. Whoever ate the most would, you got money for every bite you took.
I'm willing to bet.
And at that point, it became a competition.
I'm willing to bet the one Klingon who was bent over when her was trying to talk to him. I'm willing to bet he won.
Nope.
No.
In any competition, especially with Trek, who do you think would be the one to step up and want to win it the most?
Tell me it wasn't Shatner.
Yep.
God damn it.
Yeah. So, yeah, I always found that to be funny when I learned that fact. I was like, really? That's what they did? That's how they did it? Oh my God. Because I found it weird that nobody was really eating during this dinner.
What about his faux pas at the end of that scene? We need breathing room. Earth, Hitler, 1938. Excuse me?
I beg your pardon. and the disingenuous, we must do this again sometime. I mean, yeah, that movie, like I said earlier, I can't find anything wrong with it. It was just, for me, it was just kind of like the best of the rest, because and them bringing back Nicholas Meyer, the guy who directed Wrath of Khan, to bring him back and have him direct that movie. You knew it was going to be good, because he flipped Star Trek on its head, and he established the look and the feel for those movies with Wrath of Khan. So for him to come back, it was just, okay, we're course correcting from Star Trek V, and we're going to end this right. And with it being the movie for Gene Roddenberry, since he had passed, it was perfect that way. Can't argue it. For me, number 2 is the Wrath of Khan of the Next Generation crew, First Contact. I saw you.
I was about to have a heart attack over here.
Well, when you deemed it the Wrath of Khan of TNG movies, I was like, I'm going to steal that line just to screw with him.
Check my blood pressure here.
Exactly.
Okay, I'm still good.
Because, again, just like with The Voyage Home, this is a time travel movie that is done right, where it's not so much a trope and just a gimmick out of something. It was an integral part of the story. It was woven into the fabric, so it wasn't some cheap thrill. This had a huge overarching purpose behind it. You got to see the exact ramifications of the incident with Picard becoming Locutus. You got to see the fact that he's still dealing with that years down the road. It's like a lesser version of PTSD. He's really suffering with this stigma still. And, the Enterprise gets sidelined because of him. It doesn't get sidelined because of the ship or the crew. It got sidelined because of him. So he's feeling directly responsible for what's happening at the Battle of Earth right now because he can't be there to do his job because, oh, I was assimilated. Well, shit. But he ends up, standing up and saying, you know what, screw it. We're going to go do the thing that we need to go do. And in very Spock-esque fashion from Star Trek 6, you have Data sit there and he says, I believe I speak for everybody where I say, to hell with our orders. And, Troy starts to smile. Data's like, Riker's sitting there. I mean, if he could, he would just stand up and say, fuck yeah, and then all of a sudden they're warping into action.
One of the few callback moments done in the TNG movies that actually worked.
Yeah. Because you had the right person saying it at the right time. It was writing and timing that went perfectly there. Jonathan Frakes, I thought he did a terrific job directing that movie. He nailed the tone, the shots, the character interactions I thought were all good. I like the fact that Robert Picardo even made a brief little cameo and he dropped the classic, I'm a doctor, not a doorstop. So, I'm a doctor, not a this, that McCoy would always drop so perfectly. Yeah. So you had callbacks, but it also further advanced the story, the whole mystique of the Borg at the same time with the introduction of the Borg Queen and the links that the Borg would go to assimilate Earth. I mean, going back to before they achieved warp technology to assimilate them. I mean, that's cold-blooded. I mean, at that point, what has humanity really done that warrants being assimilated? Because usually they're looking to evolve towards perfection.
Yeah.
That's not when you would go back and assimilate Earth.
And a big part of that being, the technology that one has derived. I mean, they even mentioned that, individual people or, low enough levels of technology, the Borg really don't do anything because there's no point to it. So to go back.
Yeah, so that, I mean, there was
the only justification you can really see in them going back and assimilating humanity that early is because they know that later on humanity is going to become a major obstacle to them. So that is really the only reason to go back that early, to assimilate humanity.
And you find out at the end with the Borg Queen and everything, there's also a tinge of revenge on Picard from her. Oh, you flatter yourself. No, she took him no longer being Locutus personally. So for her to travel back in time and assimilate Earth, I think that there was a hint of revenge to it as well. Data's personal growth in that movie, I thought, was really telling. The fact that Picard was able to say what he said to Worf, and Worf didn't just kill him right then. I mean, and he even stated as much. If you were any other man, I would kill you where you stand. That's ballsy coming from Worf. Because he was always real big about following orders and being like the perfect little soldier. I mean, he never really questioned much. So for him to stand up like that, it's like, ooh, but he had that level of respect. So you got to see how that relationship has continued over the years, even though Worf is on DS9. I didn't like so much what they did with the Defiant, because the Defiant really shouldn't have been torn up the way that it was. Because this was a ship, again, designed to defeat the Borg, and it's adrift and salvageable by the end.
The plot armor failed in that case to justify transferring Worf over to the Enterprise. Which, I mean, you figure they would have bothered to ask if he knew how to fire phasers before they brought him over. I mean, why waste the transporter energy?
You still remember how to fire phasers? Yeah, his reaction to that, I mean, again, that's Jonathan Frakes knowing where he can work some humor in and how to work it in correctly with character interactions. The crafty bastards at ILM working in the Millennium Falcon is pretty clever during the Battle of Earth. I don't know. Steve, are you familiar with that? Let him finish hitting his vape.
It's been a while since I've seen that one, so I don't.
Well, so it's one of those blink and you miss it type things. But apparently, when the Borg cube explodes early in the movie, in the explosion, you see, flying in the background, you see like a little profile shot of the Millennium Falcon.
I'll have to watch again.
Since ILM handled the visual
main thing
effects.
I was watching at that point was the ships that got caught in the explosion and died along with it. So,
yeah, I mean, so it's one of those little Easter egg things. So, I mean, it was just clever all the way through. You have Troy trying to talk with Cochran, and she's getting drunk, and she's just pass out drunk. Then you have Riker just going, oh, like classic facepalm moments.
Yes.
Barkley being Barkley. Not a huge fan of Geordi's eye implants, but I get it. I guess he didn't want to wear a car's air filter on his face anymore, and it wouldn't be very cinematic. So that part made sense. That, and after the visor had been turned into a weapon not once but twice, it's like, okay, we got to get rid of this thing. But I thought that was, in terms of the 4 TNG movies, obviously it stands above all of them, and it's such a strong movie overall that I feel it shoots right to the top of the list. Now, of course, number 1 is no mystery.
I was about to say, we don't even need to roundtable this one. We can just freely comment at this point.
Okay, so number 1, best Trek movie, Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan. As if there was any mystery.
They took an episode that most people probably didn't remember by that point, because it was just a one-off character and a one-off episode, and then they built an entire movie out of it and did so absolutely beautifully, right? No weird justification on how they did it. It was completely plausible, completely believable, and I was absolutely beautifully done the way they did it. So, beautiful action, and they did it on Kirk's terms this time, where Space Seed, they were actually face-to-face fighting, and now they do it on Kirk's terms, in Starship Battle, and just how relentless Khan could be. Just absolutely beautifully done.
Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan established the look for the original crew in terms of their movies. It established the overall look. You had, in the motionless picture, you had space pajamas. Now we have a really well-defined uniform that, yes, very militaristic in appearance, but it looked sharp. You believe that these were officers in some sort of service, where before, the original series, shirt and pants, rank, around the cuff of the shirts and the embroidered insignia and everything. Obviously there's only so much you can do with what they had to work with. But at least it was uniform.
Was what, $15?
Yeah, exactly. So, and the Wrath of Khan was able to do so much with only half the budget of the original motion picture.
Mm-hmm.
And yet they were able to craft such a great story, establish this great, sharp look. Those uniforms are probably the most iconic of the entire franchise. And the thing I liked about First Contact was that it gave them that iconic era-defining uniform. In Generations, you still had the TV uniform mixed with the DS9 uniform, and it was all kind of hodgepodged all the way through. LaForge's uniform didn't even fit him because it was Colomini's from DS9. You had Riker, who was wearing Avery Brooks's uniform in Generations, and the sleeves weren't long enough, so that's why he had them rolled up all the time. It was just a mess with the uniforms in Generations. In First Contact, they got these great sharp looking uniforms that I thought those were the best TNG era uniforms because they were simple, but they were uniform. Same thing here. Not as simple, but uniform. Everybody knows exactly what rank you are, what division you are, and everything stands out.
Absolutely the best uniform in the Star Trek universe.
Yeah, I mean, when I think of the original series movies, that's the look I gravitate to. I could spot them. I know them. I know exactly what it is. No questions asked. Khan was such a great villain, and it furthered just like in First Contact. That's why those were my 1 and 2. It took an element from the series and furthered the narrative and gave you a sense of conclusion, and gave you that sense that the stakes were higher. So it continued that, and Ricardo Montalban's chest. I mean, that chest was insane. And that wasn't, the urban myth, urban legend of it. It was that it was like a prosthetic chest. No, that was him. Like in between shots, he was doing pull-ups and stuff like that to make that chest just rocking all the way through. So that's, you take the budget. Now they did reuse a lot of shots. The Klingon attack cruisers during the Kobayashi Maru test, which introducing that test I thought was awesome. The Enterprise leaving dry dock, straight rip from the motion picture. But again, cleverly used. Wasn't, the Enterprise porn that we had gotten, but it was just enough to establish, okay, we're heading out. I didn't like so much that the Enterprise had been relegated to a training ship, but I guess in terms of its length of service and everything, it started to make sense. But I like the misdirection at the beginning of the movie where you have this female's voice who's commanding the Enterprise, and then your big reveal at the end of the test with the view screen becoming this big giant door. You hear Kirk saying, "All right, open it up." And, he walks through the spotlight. You just see the outline. Then he's just standing there. I mean, that was a great reveal. The introduction of Carol Marcus and Data.
Yes.
All of a sudden you gave personal stakes to Kirk. You had Kirk at the beginning of the movie feeling old, washed out, used up. Well, what am I doing here still? Then all of a sudden, by the end of it, he's like, yeah, I still got it. I'm the man. All of a sudden, he's got his BDE back and he's good to go. So there were a lot of stakes in that movie. What can you say about it that's wrong or bad? Hopefully Michael here can provide some sort of answer as to why it's bad. Why is... Dang it!
I mean, I mentioned before, I wasn't a huge fan of the Genesis device as a device. But honestly, there's really nothing I can point to that makes this even an uncomfortable moment during the movie. I mean, everything about it was just perfect. I mean, they were very careful with this story.
Well, I mean,
do you have any complaints? Do you think you can...
I mean, the whole thing about it...
the shot of Kirk when he's accessing the Genesis information. He's like leaning in like this, and then all of a sudden they're like, submit your eye for retinal verification, and it's like...
Oh, yeah, that was...
And then the single most expensive sequence in that movie was that whole CG thing with the Genesis report.
Oh, really?
That was the single most expensive thing in that movie. Was that short little video about the Genesis device.
Identify for retina scan.
Kirk, Admiral James T.
Security scan approved.
Summary, please.
Project Genesis, a proposal to the Federation.
Carol Marcus.
Yes.
What exactly is Genesis? Well, put simply, Genesis is life from lifelessness. It is a process whereby molecular structure is reorganized at the subatomic level into life-generating matter of equal mass. Stage 1 of our experiments was conducted in the laboratory. Stage 2 of the series will be attempted in a lifeless underground. Stage 3 will involve the process on a planetary scale. It is our intention to introduce the Genesis device into a pre-selected area of a lifeless space body, a moon or other dead form. The device is delivered, instantaneously causing what we call the Genesis effect. Matter is reorganized with life-generating results. Instead of a dead moon, a living, breathing planet capable of sustaining whatever life forms we see fit to deposit on it.
Fascinating.
The reformed moon simulated here represents the merest fraction of the Genesis potential, should the Federation wish to fund these experiments to their logical conclusion. When we consider the cosmic problems of population and food supply, the usefulness of this process becomes clear. This concludes our proposal. Thank you for your attention.
Wow.
I mean, well, the whole thing about it being a device was really just another push towards religious view. Again, I mean, McCoy even brought it up. You know, according to myth, the Earth was created in 6 days. Now, watch out! Here comes Genesis. We're going to do it for you in 6 minutes.
Really, Doctor? You must learn to govern your passions. They will be your undoing.
it was just another push towards, some sort of religious look on things. I mean, not really going so deep into it, but
but even Sarek said that Genesis was perfectly named.
Yeah.
The creation of life, not death.
But I mean, when you really think about it, it's another example. You know, in this case, religiously, it's another example of, one of my favorite lines from Star Trek VI. Let us redefine progress to include that just because you can do a thing, it does not mean that you must do that thing. Sure, we might have the ability to do this, but does that necessarily mean that we should, or that it's even right for us to do this? Right?
Well, if you think about it, after the introduction of Genesis in TNG, we went back to terraforming. Everything, you had terraforming projects where they were carving and creating stuff rather than doing it in one shot.
So, and that's the whole point of it is, with this type of device, you are messing with the natural order. And, just like was pointed out in that discussion, if you use, it would be a perfect weapon for just stealing a planet from somebody, because you could just one shot, you kill off everybody that's there, and the planet is now usable for you.
That's right. It would destroy such life in favor of its new matrix. It's new matrix.
So, I mean, really the only down point that I have for this movie, and I brought this up before, was the plot hole with Chekhov meeting Khan, because there was no logical connection to it. But even that is just absolutely so minor compared to the rest of the movie.
Yeah, and the fact that when you find out later that scene was actually written for Sulu. Sulu was supposed to be off on the Reliance. Sulu was supposed to be doing all of that stuff. And
I still say that would have been a better scene. It absolutely would have.
Oh my. Oh, Khan knew.
I never forget
Don't
face,
put that in my ear. Ooh.
Sulu, isn't it? Oh my.
Oh my.
Especially with Ricardo Montalban's chest all hanging out like that. He probably wouldn't have waited for the end of the Khan would. Khan would have pulled off the mask and that chest had been there, he'd be like, oh my.
Yeah, he wouldn't have even been able to say Khan. It would have been, oh my.
Oh, Khan.
Nobody would have known who it was until 20 minutes later when he finally said his name and introduced himself.
Yes.
It would have
Stick your
been
eel in
Sulu
my
going,
ear.
oh my. Exactly. Not that we have a problem with Sulu or the actor portraying him being gay.
No. It just would have been a very amusing scene.
And knowing that part about the actor, you would have been like, makes total sense
Yep.
now. Oh, okay. Well, now that now the show's gonna get canceled. Now cancel culture will come after it, which is fine. I'm more than okay with it.
It's what they do.
Yeah. And it's never enough. It's never enough. So we're all in agreement that the best movie was Wrath of Khan.
And the worst was...
Did we even agree? We all agreed that the worst
Into
movie
Darkness.
was Into Darkness.
So...
And we're...
For the same reasons. For theft and plagiarism and...
Do we want to discuss the what the culture rating, or just let them watch the video?
Make them sit through it. I mean, their ranking. Some of it was right. Some of it was wrong.
I mean, I've got serious issues when you've got Generations and Beyond over Star Trek 6. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, Star Trek 5, yeah, we all agree was a pretty bad movie, but I would still watch that before any of the Kelvin timeline movies. So putting it at the very bottom didn't make sense. Like, the only thing on this list of theirs that I agreed with was their number one, which I don't think anybody other than a complete idiot would disagree with the idea of Wrath of Khan being the number one Star Trek movie.
And although visually that one doesn't hold up as much, the storyline holds up.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, by far that one holds up the best. And honestly, I mean, nobody, and I mean absolutely nobody, would sit here and say that William Shatner is such a tremendous actor. You know, I mean, is he good? Yes. Is he great? No. But the end of Wrath of Khan, you believed it. You felt the emotion. That was powerful shit.
That was one case
With
where
the
his
death of Spock.
overacting worked for it.
Yeah, absolutely. And even then, I'm not 100% sure he was really overacting, because he didn't have those telltale signs. You know, he didn't go full Shatner in that scene.
His cadence problems.
You never go full Shatner.
His manner of speaking and disjointed sentences.
Exactly.
The way he did.
And putting emphasis on the wrong word.
I will give him credit, though. If you've ever seen him when he was in part of a Comedy Central roast, he acknowledges the fact that he's known for that and messes with it in those roasts. So he's aware of it.
Oh, and today, I mean, he's a total parody of himself. I mean, he knows it, and he takes it and he runs with it. He's made a whole new version of himself using that as like the catalyst. Which, I mean, the guy's 90 years old. He's going to be going up into space this month. He's going to be the oldest man in history to go to space. And he's taking Blue Origin to do it. I mean, that's badass. Captain Kirk is going to the stars. He's going to space.
Say what you will about the...
Now, of course, he's not the first cast member of that show to go to space, but, you know, he will be the first living one.
Say what you will about the man and his acting. I mean, he acknowledges who he is, and I mean, he has fun with it. He doesn't sit there and try and say anybody's wrong for it or anything like that. like, hey, okay, and makes it work for him.
Absolutely. I mean, but the Spock death scene really made you feel it, and made you wonder: is this really what's going down? Because back then we didn't have all the sources and the leaks and everything that we have,
and especially when he's sitting there, he's like, "What do you think of my solution to the no-win scenario?" Because that really was a no-win scenario, and they still cheated it, and it wasn't even a computer glitch or anything that did it.
And this is another scenario where Kirk basically cheated death, and rather than patting himself on the back for cheating death like he had in the past, this was the one where he really felt it, and he didn't feel it as a win. He took it as a loss. The whole crew took it as a loss. And hearing his monologue during Star Trek 3, where he's like, the death of Spock is like an open wound. You hear the grisliness in his voice, and just basically like the pain right then. I mean, that stuff felt genuine as hell. Everything right that they got at the end during Wrath of Khan and during the opening parts of Star Trek 3, they got completely wrong with Into Darkness.
Absolutely.
I mentioned that Chris Pine and Zachary Quinto could be considered superior actors in some way, shape, or form. I'm sure some people would say they're tremendous. I don't know. But I didn't feel any of that. I didn't feel a bond or a connection between that Kirk and that Spock, where Kirk flipping the script and taking care of the warp core himself, and then Spock having his breakdown moment, yelling Khan, which wasn't nearly as anger and pain filled as it was with Kirk. I didn't feel all of that, because that version of Kirk and that version of Spock hadn't grown to have that kind of a bond where Prime Kirk and Prime Spock had served together for all of those years and really became a brotherhood with McCoy and the rest of that crew. Now you had the central trinity, but then you had everybody else. The Kelvin crew felt disjointed all the time. I didn't feel any real bond or connection between any of them, except Scotty and that little alien guy.
And, I mean, definitely what you were saying about Pine and Quinto. Chris Pine was in Wonder Woman, which is the only other thing I've seen him in, and I thought he was actually really good in that movie. Zachary Quinto was in the Heroes TV series.
An American Horror Story.
I've never seen that. But I thought Quinto was great in Heroes. So they absolutely are great actors. They are simply terrible Kirk and Spock when you compare them to the original cast.
Well, I think when you put them in that type of scenario, the Wrath of Khan, Spock death, or death sequence, yeah, absolutely. They are not ready for that type of Spock. I mean, but I will say that Carl Urban was definitely the best guy for
absolutely.
For Bones. Although I thought in the second and third movie, especially in again, Into Darkness, he spoke into just metaphors all the time. You don't run the Kentucky Derby without leaving your best horse in the stable. Bones didn't always talk like that. So, but he did. But I thought Carl Urban was definitely the best choice for that Bones. He carried it well. I think he was the one that handled the gravity of the role the best out of the main three.
Mm-hmm.
But I still think What Culture got a lot of things wrong, probably because they're British. I mean, what has Britain given us recently in terms of like their television or movies? They gave us a female Doctor Who.
I mean, I couldn't even get through that series when it was the male Doctor Who's. It's not my cup of tea. My daughter loves Doctor Who. I can't stand it. Of course.
See, I enjoyed Christopher Eccleston, David Tennant, and Matt Smith as the Doctor. When they went to Peter Capaldi, started to lose me. When you go to Jodie Whittaker, you totally lost me, because it became when they announced a woman playing the Doctor, and people had a problem with it, and they outlined why they had a problem with it. It wasn't, okay, well, let's give it a chance and see what you think, how we retool everything. No, it was, you hate it because you're sexist and you're misogynist, and we're just going to keep on going with it. Well, don't tell me I'm the problem and then expect me to watch it.
How many times have we seen that, though? I mean, they did the Charlie's Angels movie a few years ago. And, I mean, when they were coming out with it, they were like, yeah, all you white men, this movie isn't for you. This, that, the other. We've got our agenda going on with it. And then the movie flops, and who's the first person they blame? White men who didn't want to go see the movie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Elizabeth Banks played that card well before the movie came out, which, of course, I mean, as soon as you play that card, we all know the movie is a steamy pile of shit, and you're already looking for a reason, to looking for the excuse. It was the same thing with the all-women Ghostbusters. Had nothing to do with the fact that it was poorly written, poorly executed,
or casting choices.
These women from Saturday Night Live just weren't funny. Had nothing to do with that. No, it's because we're all sexist, misogynist assholes, and we didn't want to watch a bunch of women be Ghostbusters.
They even included some of the early comments decrying the fact that it's an all-women cast. They included those in the movie. It's crazy that they were setting themselves up for controversy right away by doing that.
And it's
insane. Steve, you got something there?
No, I was basically saying the same thing. It was just horribly done, and they were going to do anything they could to admit that it was anything but horrible writing, horrible casting, just poor choices. No, it was going to be the fault of the people that they were trying to make the movie against.
Yep. And then having Thor, Chris Hemsworth, Kirk's dad, be an idiot assistant, who was more worried about his abs than doing his job, which, I mean, not even the original Ghostbusters films portrayed Janine that way.
No.
So why did they have to go over the top with that? That made no sense.
I mean, they were going over the top with everything. I mean, how about that stupid assortment of weapons they had? I mean, she reaches into the pack and pulls out dual pistols.
Yeah. And how am I supposed to believe that Kate McKinnon is the equivalent of Egon? Sorry. No, that doesn't work.
their entire
doesn't work.
Casting choice in that movie was just absolute garbage.
Yeah, let's just get a bunch of SNL people and just hope that it works. Well, guys, I appreciate you taking the time to rank all of the Trek films and get into a little bit of complaining about other things as well.
Pleasure as always.
Well, that's it. There's the rankings. Tell me what you think. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Let's have the conversation. Let's have a dialogue. And, we'll find other things to rank here in the future. But I'm thinking in the next week, I'm going to get back to some regular programming because I have some real thoughts about stuff that's been going on, as well as the thing that's really been just driving me crazy as of late. The obsession with electric cars. I was at a car dealership recently getting my new car serviced because, you have to do that every 5 to 10,000 miles. Apparently cars work better when you get them maintenanced regularly. So I was at a dealership, and what I saw absolutely made me want to cry and made me die a little bit on the inside. And I'll tell you about that in the coming weeks. I'd like to thank my wife, Nikki, also the executive producer of this show, because she lets me do the nerdy stuff. She lets me do the ranting stuff. She lets me do whatever I want on this show, and she supports it 100%. Eventually, I'll get her to come on. Some of you have been asking for it. Maybe she'll come on. But if you really want to pressure her, just hit her up on Twitter and say, hey, you need to do an episode with your husband. I mean, what? Do you not love him or something? I mean, come on. What is that? Also, I'd like to thank Ryoga, the derpy cat. He's around here somewhere. He made a quick little appearance in the episode. I'm pretty sure you noticed. If you didn't, go back and watch it again on YouTube, all right? Anyways, that's going to do it for me. I am TV's Rob. This is TV's Rob is on Woke, and I'll catch you next time.